This video covers different types of bias, so make sure you understand the different types of sampling as well as experimentation so that you have a reference for where bias can occur. Bias exists when some of the outcomes or responses are systematically favored over others when you're sampling. So when we think about different types of bias, the first is selection bias, which exists when one or more types of subjects are systematically excluded during sampling. If we think about haphazard sampling, where you set up a stand for surveying and you let people come up to take a survey, anyone who is not in the direct vicinity of that stand are being systematically excluded from your survey, so this is a form of selection bias. The other type of bias is non-response bias, and this exists when individuals chosen for the sample fail or refuse to respond. So no matter the type of survey sampling, whether it's volunteer response or haphazard sampling, in these cases, no matter when you administer a survey, you will always have participants who choose not to take the survey, and this creates non-response bias. Another form of bias is response bias, and this exists when the subjects do give a response, but the response is not trustworthy. And the best way to think about this type of bias is in terms of legal or social behavior issues, as well as the wording of survey questions. So if you've ever taken a psychology or class involving law enforcement, you may have heard of false confessions or people who are prompted to give specific answers. Similarly, when you're taking a survey, depending on the confusion of the question, this can actually affect the way that you respond. So these are just forms of response bias. And finally, there's confounding bias, which exists when there are confounding factors present that make the treatment groups different from each other than the treatment assigned. And this typically happens during experimentation. So make sure you understand experiments and what treatment groups are if you're trying to understand this type of bias. And so the best way to think about this is, let's say you're interested in studying the effects of weight gain based on the activity level of different people. Well, if you don't account for the age groups that you are studying, age could be a typical factor rather than activity level, so it's something that you're not accounting for. Similarly, let's think about this in terms of medicine. Let's say you're studying different types of medicines or drugs that you're going to administer to patients. If you don't screen your patients for underlying conditions, they could have an outside condition that's affecting your results and something that you did not account for.